Jake Thompson had been riding the same dusty trails for 15 years, but nothing had prepared him for the conversation he was about to have with his father. The old man sat on the porch of their ranch house, his weathered hands gripping a cup of black coffee as the sun painted the Texas sky orange and pink. "Son, you know the Hendersons are in trouble," his father said without looking up. "Bank's coming for their land next month." Duh! Jake knew where this was headed. The Henderson ranch bordered theirs, and old Bill Henderson had been like a second father to him growing up. But it was Bill's daughter Sarah that made Jake's stomach twist into knots whenever her name came up. "I've been thinking," his father continued, "maybe it's time you settled down. Sarah's a good woman, strong, knows ranch work better than most men I know." The words hung in the air like smoke from a campfire. Jake had known Sarah since they were kids, racing horses across the meadows and helping with cattle drives. She was beautiful, sure enough, with her long brown hair that caught the sunlight and eyes, the color of summer grass. But love? That was a different story entirely. "Pa, I don't know if that's the right reason to marry someone," Jake said, though. His voice lacked conviction. His father finally looked at him, those steel-gray eyes holding decades of hard decisions. "Sometimes doing right ain't about what feels good, son. It's about duty, about helping folks who need helping." Jake understood the unspoken agreement. If he married Sarah, the two ranches could merge. The Hendersons would keep their land, and both families would be stronger for it. It made perfect sense on paper, like a business deal written in the stars. That evening, Jake rode over to the Henderson place. Sarah was in the stable, brushing down her mare, Rosie. She looked up when she heard his boots on the wooden floor, and for a moment neither of them spoke. "Evening, Sarah," he said, removing his hat. "Jake," she nodded, continuing her work. "Pa said you might be coming by, so she knew." Of course she knew. In a small ranching community, news traveled faster than wildfire. Jake watched her steady hands work the brush through the horse's coat, the same hands that could rope a calf or mend a fence, as well as any cowboy. "Sarah, I want to be straight with you," he began. "This whole thing, it ain't about love. Not the kind they write about in books anyway." She stopped brushing and turned to face him fully. Her expression was unreadable, like she was looking at storm clouds on the horizon, trying to figure out which way the wind would blow. "I know that, Jake Thompson," she said quietly. "Question is, are you asking or telling?" The directness of her question caught him off guard. Most women he knew would have swooned or gotten emotional, but Sarah Henderson was different. She'd always been different. "I'm asking," he said. "If you'll have me, that is. I promise I'll be a good husband. I'll provide for you, protect you, treat you with respect." Sarah leaned against the stable door, studying his face in the dim light. "And what if I said no?" Jake felt his chest tighten. He hadn't really considered that possibility. "Then I'd respect that too." "But Sarah, your family's in trouble. You know it, I know it, the whole county knows it. So you're saving us? Is that it?" There was an edge to her voice now, sharp as a blade. "That's not what I meant. No, I think that's exactly what you meant." She stepped closer, and Jake could smell her perfume mixed with hay and leather. "You think I need rescuing? Like some helpless little bird with a broken wing?" Jake ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. This wasn't going the way he'd imagined. "Sarah, be practical. We've known each other all our lives. Get along fine. We both know the land, the business. Good work." She was quiet for a long moment, so long that Jake wondered if she was going to speak at all. When she finally did, her voice was steady as stone. "Give me 3 days to think about it." Jake nodded, putting his hat back on. "That's fair." As he rode home under a blanket of stars, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. But duty was duty, and sometimes a man had to do what was right, even if his heart wasn't in it. Back at the Henderson ranch, Sarah stood in her bedroom window, watching Jake's silhouette disappear into the darkness. She pressed her palm against the cool glass and closed her eyes. She'd been in love with Jake Thompson since she was 16 years old. But apparently, that love wasn't enough to make him see her as anything more than a solution to everyone's problems. The next morning brought news that changed everything. Jake was mending fence posts when his younger brother Tommy came galloping up, his horse foaming at the mouth from hard riding. "Jake, you need to get to town right now," Tommy gasped. "There's been an accident at the Henderson place." Jake's blood turned to ice water. "What kind of accident?" "Bill Henderson. Horse threw him into the rocks by the creek. Doc says it don't look good." Jake was already running toward his horse before Tommy finished speaking. The ride to town felt like the longest 20 minutes of his life. At the doctor's office, he found Sarah sitting in the waiting room, her dress torn and dirty, her face pale as fresh cotton. "How is he?" Jake asked, sitting beside her. "Doc's still with him." Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "Jake, there was so much blood." Without thinking, Jake reached over and took her hand. It was trembling like a leaf in the wind. "He's tough as old leather, Sarah. He'll pull through." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and Jake saw something in her eyes he'd never noticed before. Fear, yes, but also something deeper. Something that made his chest ache. "I can't lose him, Jake. He's all I got left." Jake squeezed her hand tighter. Sarah's mother had died when she was 12, and she'd been running the Henderson household ever since. The idea of her being truly alone in the world made Jake feel sick. Dr. Morrison emerged from the back room, wiping his hands on a bloody towel. His expression told them everything they needed to know before he even spoke. "He's alive, but barely. Broke 3 ribs, punctured a lung, and there's swelling in his brain. Next 48 hours will tell the tale." Sarah stood up so fast she nearly fell over. Jake caught her elbow, steadying her. "Can I see him? For a few minutes?" "But he's not conscious." Jake watched Sarah disappear into the back room, and something shifted inside his chest. The woman he'd proposed to just yesterday wasn't the same woman who'd just walked through that door. This Sarah was vulnerable, scared, completely alone in the world except for a father who might not make it through the night. When she came back out, tears were streaming down her cheeks. Jake had seen Sarah cry exactly twice in all the years. He'd known her, once when her mother died, and once when their old dog Rex got kicked by a bull and had to be put down. "He looks so small," she whispered. Jake didn't know what to say. So he just put his arm around her shoulders and let her lean against him. They sat like that for hours, watching the sun move across the dusty window, listening to the sounds of the small town going about its business outside. "Jake," Sarah said finally, "about what you asked me yesterday. Don't worry about that now. That can wait." "No, it can't." She pulled away from him and looked him straight in the eye. "God, if Pa dies, the bank'll take everything anyway." "There won't be anything left to save?" Jake felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. "Sarah, don't talk like that. He's going to be fine. And if he's not, what then? You still want to marry a woman with nothing but debt and heartache?" The question hung between them like a challenge. Jake realized this was a test, though he wasn't sure what the right answer was supposed to be. "The offer stands," he said quietly. "No matter what happens." Something flickered across Sarah's face, too quick for Jake to read. Even if there's no land, there's no merger, no practical reason, even then. She nodded slowly like she was filing that information away somewhere safe. "Appreciate that, Jake, I truly do." But her tone suggested she didn't quite believe him, and Jake couldn't blame her. He wasn't sure he believed himself. That night, Geese stayed at the doctor's office while Sarah caught a few hours of sleep in the chair beside her father's bed. He found himself pacing the front porch, watching the stars and thinking about things he'd never bothered to consider before. What did he really know about Sarah Henderson? He knew she could ride and rope and shoot as well as any man. He knew she made the best apple pie in the county and that she read books by lamplight when she thought no one was watching. He knew she had a small scar on her chin from falling out of a tree when she was 8 and that she hummed while she worked. But what did she dream about? What made her happy? What broke her heart besides watching her father fight for his life? As dawn broke over the small Texas town, Jake realized he was about to marry a woman he'd known his whole life, but didn't really know at all. And for the first time since his father had brought up the idea of marriage. What? Jake wondered if maybe that was the real problem. Not that he didn't love her, but that he'd never bothered to try. Bill Henderson fought like a wild Mustang for 3 days and nights. On the morning of the 4th day, he opened his eyes and asked for water. Sarah cried for the first time since the accident, but these were tears of relief. "You gave us quite a scare, old man," Jake said, squeezing Bill's shoulder gently. Bill's voice was weak, but steady. "Takes more than an ornery horse to put me in the ground." His eyes moved between Jake and Sarah, though I hear you two got some talking to do. Sarah blushed and looked at her hands. Jake cleared his throat. "Sir, I'd like to ask for your daughters." "Hand in marriage? A little formal. Considering you've been asking her yourself," Bill said with a weak smile. "But I appreciate the respect. The question is, does she want to marry you?" All eyes turned to Sarah. She'd been thinking about nothing else. For days, watching Jake bring her coffee and sit with her through the long nights. She'd seen how he talked to the other patients, how he helped an old woman find her way to the doctor's office, how he'd given his last $5 to a family who couldn't afford medicine for their sick child. "Yes, Pa, I'll marry him." Jake felt a rush of something that might have been relief or might have been terror. He wasn't sure which. "Then it's settled," Bill said. "Though I got one condition." Jake and Sarah looked at him expectantly. "Wait until I'm back on my feet, too." "Have the wedding?" "I ain't missing my only daughter's wedding because I'm laid up in some doctor's office." 2 weeks later, Bill Henderson was indeed back on his feet, though he moved slower and needed help with the heavier ranch work. The wedding was set for the first Saturday in October, which gave Sarah 6 weeks to prepare. Jake threw himself into ranch work like a man possessed, trying not to think too hard about what he was about to do. But Sarah was different now. She watched him sometimes when she thought he wasn't looking, studying him like she was trying to solve a puzzle. One evening, Jake was fixing the gate to the Hendersons' main pasture when Sarah walked over with a glass of lemonade. "Thought you might be thirsty," she said. "Much obliged." Jake took the glass and drank deeply. The lemonade was perfect, sweet but with just enough tartness to cut through the heat of the day. "Jake, can I ask you something?" "Sure. Do you remember? The summer we were 15, when that storm hit and we got trapped in the old line shack up on Devil's Ridge?" Jake nearly choked on his lemonade. Of course he remembered. They'd been caught in a flash flood while checking on stray cattle, forced to spend the night in the abandoned cabin. Sarah had been soaked to the skin, and Jake had given her his dry shirt while he sat by the fire in just his undershirt, trying not to look at her. "I remember," he said carefully. "You gave me your shirt," she continued. "And when I said I was scared of the thunder, you told me stories all night to keep my mind off the storm." Jake nodded, wondering where this was going. "You told me about the places you wanted to see someday. California, with its ocean and mountains. Maybe even New York City, with buildings taller than trees." Sarah paused, swirling the ice in her. "Own glass? You ever still think about those places?" The question caught Jake off guard. He hadn't thought about those dreams in years. Life had a way of wearing down a young man's wanderlust, grinding it into dust under the weight of responsibility. Sometimes, he admitted, but a man's got duties. He can't just go chasing after full dreams. Who says they're full dreams? Jake looked at her sharply. "Sarah, what's this about?" She was quiet for a long moment, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. When she spoke again, her voice was so soft Jake had to lean closer to hear her. "I used to think about going with you." The words hit Jake like a lightning bolt. "Night in the line shack? When you talked about seeing the ocean? I imagined what it would be like to see it with you. To stand on a beach somewhere far away from all this dust and responsibility and just... be free." Jake felt like the ground was shifting under his feet. "Sarah, I know," she interrupted. "We were just kids then, kids with stupid dreams." She looked at him directly, and Jake saw something burning in her green eyes. "But sometimes I wonder if maybe the stupid thing is giving up on them." Before Jake could respond, Sarah turned and walked back toward the house, leaving him standing by the gate with an empty glass and a head full of questions he didn't know how to answer. That night, Jake lay in his bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about that storm-trapped night 7 years ago. He remembered how Sarah had looked in his shirt, which hung nearly to her knees. He remembered how her hair had curled when it dried and how she'd fallen asleep against his shoulder while he kept watch by the dying fire. But mostly, he remembered the way she'd listened to his dreams like they were the most important things in the world, not the foolish ramblings of a boy who didn't know any better. For the first time since his father had suggested marriage, Jake began to wonder if maybe he'd been thinking about this whole thing wrong. Maybe the question wasn't whether he could learn to love Sarah Henderson. Maybe the question was whether he already did. 3 weeks before the wedding, Jake made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. He rode into town and sent a telegram to his cousin Marcus in San Francisco, asking about work opportunities on the coast. He told himself he was just curious, just exploring options for someday down the road. But deep down, he knew better. Sarah's words about dreams and freedom had planted something in his mind that wouldn't stop growing. The reply came back. 2 days later, plenty of work. Here for a man who knows horses. Come when you're ready. Marcus Jake folded the telegram and put it in his shirt pocket, where it burned like a coal against his chest. He didn't tell anyone about it, not even Tommy. That evening he found Sarah in her mother's old garden, tending to the vegetables with the same careful attention she gave everything else. She looked up when she heard his footsteps, shading her eyes against the setting sun. Evening, Jake. Evening. He took off his hat and fidgeted with the brim. Sarah, I've been thinking about what you said the other day. What part? About dreams. About seeing places. He paused, trying to find the right words. What if I told you there might be a way to see that ocean after all? Sarah straightened up slowly, a handful of green beans in her dirt-stained hands. What do you mean? I got a cousin in San Francisco. He says there's work there for someone who knows horses. Good work. The kind that might let a person build something of their own. For a moment, Sarah didn't say anything. Then she laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Jake Thompson, are you having second thoughts about marrying me? That's not what this is about, isn't it? She wiped her hands on her apron, leaving streaks of earth across the white fabric. 3 weeks before our wedding, and you're talking about running off to California? I'm talking about us going to California. Together, after we're married. Sarah stared at him like he'd grown a second head. What about the ranches? What about your pa? My pa. They managed before we were born. They'll manage after we're gone. That they'll lose everything to the bank while we're off chasing fool dreams. On some beach? The words stung because they were probably true. Jake knew it, Sarah knew it, and the silence that stretched between them confirmed it. Maybe some things are worth more than land and cattle, Jake said finally. Sarah's eyes flashed. With something that might have been anger or might have been pain, easy words from someone who's never had to worry about losing everything. That's not fair, Sarah, isn't it? You're the heir to the biggest ranch in 3 counties. If you walk away, you've still got something to come back to. If I walk away, I've got nothing. Less than nothing. Jake felt his own temper rising. So this is about money, after all. This is about survival, Jake. Something you've never had to worry about. Sarah's voice was getting louder now, years of frustration pouring out. You want to know why I said yes to marrying you? 'Cause I was tired of being afraid. Tired of lying awake at night, wondering if we'd lose the ranch, if Pa would drink himself. To death from worry, if I'd end up old and alone with nothing to show for it. Jake felt like he'd been slapped. So you're using me? And you're using me right back? Sarah shouted. Don't pretend this is about love, Jake Thompson. You said it. Yourself the night you proposed? This ain't about love. It's about duty. It's about doing what's practical. They stood glaring at each other across the garden, both breathing hard. In the distance, a coyote howled, and the sound seemed to echo the ache in Jake's chest. Still maybe you're right, he said quietly. Maybe this whole thing is a mistake. Something flickered across Sarah's face, but it was gone too quickly for Jake to read. Maybe it is. Jake put his hat back on and turned to go, but Sarah's voice stopped him. Jake. He looked back at her, standing among her mother's vegetables with dirt on her hands and tears starting to shine in her eyes. If things were different, if we didn't have all this responsibility weighing us down, do you think we could have been happy? The question hit Jake like a punch to the gut. I don't know, Sarah. I honestly don't know. That night, Jake sat on his own porch with a bottle of whiskey, staring at the stars and thinking about choices. His father found him there around midnight, still nursing the same glass he'd poured hours earlier. You look like a man with something. Heavy on his mind, the older man said, settling into the chair beside him. Pa, did you love Ma when you married her? His father was quiet for so long that Jake thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft as the night. Wind, I thought I did. But looking back, I think I loved the idea of her more than I loved her. Took me years to learn the difference. What's the difference? Loving someone means wanting what's best for them, even if it ain't what's best for you. Loving the idea of someone means wanting them to fit into the life you've already planned out. Jake turned to look at his father, seeing him clearly for maybe the first time. Which one is this thing with Sarah? His father smiled sadly. I think you already know the answer to that, son. Jake did know. Question was, what was he going to do about it? Jake didn't sleep that night. Instead, he saddled his horse and rode out to the place where his and Sarah's properties met, a small hill overlooking both ranches. He'd come here as a boy when he needed to think, and somehow his horse had found its way here without any direction from him. The sun was just starting to paint the eastern sky when he heard another horse approaching. He didn't need to look to know it was Sarah. She had the same restless spirit he did, and this hill had always called to both of them when the world felt too heavy. Couldn't sleep either? She asked, sliding down from her horse. Not a wink. They stood side by side in comfortable silence, watching their world wake up below them. Cattle were starting to move toward water, and smoke was beginning to rise from the chimneys of both ranch houses. Jake, I owe you an apology, Sarah said finally. What I said yesterday about using you? That wasn't fair. You weren't wrong, though. Maybe not. But it wasn't the whole truth either. She picked up a small stone and turned it over in her hands. Do you want to know the real reason I said yes to marrying you? Jake nodded, not trusting his voice. 'Cause I've been in love with you since I was 16 years old, and I figured half of you was better than none of you. The words hung in the morning air like birdsong. Jake felt something shift inside his chest, like a door opening that he didn't even know had been closed. Sarah, ... Let me finish. She threw the stone down the hill and watched it bounce and roll. But sitting in that doctor's office, watching you hold my hand and bring me coffee and worry about PA like he was your own family, I realized something. Half of you isn't enough anymore. Jake turned to face her fully. What are you saying? Saying, I can't marry you, Jake. Not like this. It's not when you're just doing your duty and I'm just trying to survive. Her voice was steady, but Jake could see her hands trembling. We both deserve better than that. Jake felt like the ground was crumbling beneath his feet. But the ranch, ... your father. The bank, ... we'll figure something out. Maybe sell to your family. Maybe find another buyer. Maybe lose everything. Sarah's chin lifted with stubborn pride. But at least we'll have our dignity. Sarah, you don't understand. If you don't marry me, you'll lose everything. And if I do marry you, I'll lose myself. She looked at him with eyes that held more courage than any cowboy he'd ever known. I won't spend my life wondering if my husband married me out of love or out of pity. Jake opened his mouth to argue, but no words came, because deep down, he knew she was right. A marriage built on duty and desperation wasn't a marriage at all. It was just two people agreeing to be miserable together. So what now? He asked Sarah. Smiled, and for the first time in weeks, it reached her eyes. Now, we stop pretending we're something we're not. We stop trying to fix everyone else's problems with our lives. The whole county will talk. Let them talk. Sarah's smile turned mischievous. Besides, might give them something more interesting to gossip about than the weather. Despite everything, Jake found himself smiling too. You realize we just called off our wedding 3 weeks before the ceremony. I realize we just saved ourselves from a lifetime of regret. They stood in comfortable silence again, but something had changed. The weight that had been pressing down on both of them for weeks was gone, replaced by something lighter. Something that felt like possibility. Jake, Sarah said eventually. What? That telegram from your cousin in California? You still got it? Jake patted his shirt pocket, surprised to find the telegram still there. Yeah, why? Sarah's eyes sparked. With something that looked like the old Sarah? It's the one who used to dare him to race horses across dangerous terrain and climb trees that were too tall for safety. Just wondering if he mentioned whether they need women who know horses too. Jake stared at her. Sarah Henderson, are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything, she said, walking toward her horse. Saying that if a person was crazy enough to chase fool dreams all the way to California, it might be nice to have a friend along for company. She swung up into her saddle with practiced grace and looked down at him. Think about it, Jake Thompson. But don't think too long. Dreams have a way of slipping away if you don't grab hold of them. With that, she rode away, leaving Jake standing on the hill with a telegram in his pocket and a choice that would change everything. For the first time since this whole mess started, Jake felt like he could see clearly. Maybe love wasn't about duty after all. Maybe it was about finding someone brave enough to jump off cliffs with you, not someone willing to tie you down to keep you safe. Maybe Sarah Henderson had just given him the most stunning reply of his life. Jake didn't think long. By noon that same day, he was sitting across from his father at the kitchen table. The telegram spread between them like a map to a new world. California, his father said, not a question but a statement, heavy with years of unspoken dreams, yes, sir. And Sarah, she's thinking about it. His father leaned back in his chair, studying Jake's face the way he studied cattle before a purchase. You know what you're giving up? I know what I'm not giving up, Jake replied. My chance to find out what I'm really made of. A slow smile spread across his father's weathered face. You sound like me at your age, before I got scared and settled for safe. That evening, Jake found Sarah in the stable again, same as the night he'd first proposed. But everything was different now. She looked up when he entered, and the question was written all over her face. I sent a telegram to Marcus this morning, Jake said without preamble. Told him to expect 2 people, not 1. Sarah's hand stilled on the brush. You did what? I figured if we're going to chase fool dreams, we might as well chase them together. Sarah set down the brush and turned to face him fully. Jake Thompson, are you asking me to run away with you? I'm asking you to run towards something with me. There's a difference. The distinction seemed to matter to her. She nodded slowly, like she was testing the weight of the idea. What about your PA? The ranch? PA says he should have done the same thing 30 years ago. Says maybe it's time someone in the Thompson family had the courage to follow their dreams. Jake stepped closer. What about your pa? Sarah laughed, and it was the first genuinely happy sound he'd heard from her in months. Pa says California could use more sensible women to keep all the crazy prospectors and cowboys in line. Jake felt his heart start to race. So that's a yes? It's a yes to going to California, Sarah said carefully. But Jake, I need you to understand something. I'm not going as your wife. I'm going as your friend. Your partner, maybe, if we decide that makes sense once we get there. But not your wife. Not yet. Jake nodded. I wouldn't want it any other way. And if we get there and decide we don't suit each other after all, then we'll wish each other well and go our separate ways. No hard feelings. Sarah extended her hand, and Jake shook it solemnly. Partners, then, in this crazy adventure. Partners. The hardest part was facing the town. News of the canceled wedding spread like wildfire, and opinions were divided between those who thought they were brave and those who thought they were fools. Jake and Sarah bore the gossip with as much grace as they could muster, keeping their California plans to themselves until the last possible moment, 3 days before they were supposed to leave. Jake found an envelope slipped under his door. Inside was a deed to the Henderson Ranch, signed over to his father, along with a note in Sarah's careful handwriting for taking care of Pa, and for raising a son brave enough to choose love over duty. He found her at their old meeting spot on the hill, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. You didn't have to do that, he said, sitting beside her. Yes, I did. Pa needs looking after, and your father needs the land. Besides, I can't very well chase dreams while I'm tied down by property. Jake pulled out his own envelope, this one containing his portion of the family ranch, signed over to his brother Tommy. Great minds think alike. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their old world prepare to sleep while they prepared to step into a new one. "Jake," Sarah said as the first stars appeared. "Yeah, are you scared?" Jake considered lying then. Decided they were past the point where lies served any purpose. "Terrified," good Sarah said, standing and brushing dust from her skirt. "That means we're doing something worth doing." 2 weeks later, Jake Thompson and Sarah Henderson stood on a bluff overlooking the Pacific Ocean, watching waves crash against rocks older than memory. Salt air filled their lungs, and the endless horizon filled their eyes. "It's bigger than I imagined," Sarah said, her voice full of wonder. "Everything's bigger than we imagined," Jake replied. They'd found work at a horse ranch north of San Francisco, Sarah as a trainer and Jake as a foreman. The work was hard but honest, and for the first time in their lives, they were building something that belonged entirely to them. "Any regrets?" Jake asked. Sarah looked at him, this man she'd known all her life, but was only now beginning to truly understand. The California sun had bronzed his skin and put gold highlights in his brown hair. But more than that, there was something in his eyes that hadn't been there in Texas, something that looked like contentment. "Ask me in a year," she said with a smile, but Jake could see the answer already. Written in the way she stood straighter here, the way she laughed more easily, the way she looked at him sometimes when she thought he wasn't paying attention. They'd both thought duty was the highest calling a person could answer. But standing there on that cliff with the whole world spread out before them, they realized that sometimes the most dutiful thing you can do is follow your heart, even when it leads you far from home, especially when it leads you home to yourself.